Mexico City, January of 1964, and a bronze two-door coupe waits at the curb with its hood standing open. Black vinyl roof above Italian bodywork, a turbine blade pattern pressed into the wheel covers and repeated again on the console inside. The President of Mexico has just asked whether this car will honestly run on tequila, and he has offered to supply the tequila himself. A Chrysler public relations man telephones Detroit, where the engineers go out, buy the cheapest tequila they can find, and put a few gallons through a test engine to be certain before anybody promises anything. Word comes back that it works. 2 gallons go into the tank, and the president gets his ride. That is the tequila. And the tequila is documented, right down to the wire copy. The perfume is a different matter. Chrysler's own advertising promised this engine would gulp everything from peanut oil to Chanel No. 5, and that one sentence has now outrun the car by 60 years. Nowhere in the surviving record does anybody actually pour perfume into one of these cars. The claim itself was accurate. The event never happened. And the perfume is the smaller of the two things this story gets told wrong. The larger one is the ending, which usually arrives in a single sentence, namely that the federal government bailed Chrysler out, and the bailout came with a condition attached: kill the turbine. That is not what happened either. The law that rescued Chrysler never mentions the turbine anywhere in its text, and the government had already stopped paying for the engine 4 months before that law was signed, having handed the work instead to General Motors and Ford. There is the research contract that quietly ran out in June of 1979, and the award list published 4 months later without Chrysler's name anywhere on it. There is the single fuel this engine could not burn, which happened to be the fuel sold at nearly every pump in America. And there are the 50 cars Chrysler handed to ordinary American families, 46 of which the company later destroyed on purpose. This video covers what the Chrysler Turbine Car actually was, what it could actually drink, and the 2 separate decisions that ended it. 8 years before Mexico City, in March of 1956, a Chrysler engineer named George Huebner pointed a Plymouth west out of New York toward Los Angeles, and there were no pistons anywhere in it. Huebner had been chasing turbines for passenger cars since 1945. 2 years before this drive, on the 16th of June 1954, he had rolled a turbine-powered Plymouth Belvedere in front of more than 500 reporters at Chrysler's Chelsea Proving Grounds and invited them to look at an engine with no crankshaft in it. What he wanted to know next was whether the thing could cross a continent. 3,020 miles is what the trip came to. A support convoy trailed him the entire way, which is the detail the legend tends to leave out, but the engine never quit. 2 minor repairs were needed along the route, and neither one touched the turbine. Fuel economy came in around 13 miles to the gallon, which in 1956 was completely unremarkable, and that was rather the point. No gas turbine car had ever crossed the United States before. The work kept going after that. A second-generation engine in another Plymouth averaged 19.4 miles per gallon, running from Detroit to New Jersey in 1959. And by 1961, Chrysler had a third-generation unit called the CR2A, the first one the company bothered to give a name to. That engine ran New York to Los Angeles in December of that year, then Los Angeles to San Francisco in January of the next, and finished with a barnstorming tour through 90 American cities, where roughly 14,000 ordinary people were handed a ride in it. 14,000 Americans had now sat inside a car with a jet engine under the hood, and not one of them could buy one. Which brings us to the 14th of May, 1963, at the Essex House Hotel in New York City, where Chrysler introduced the 4th-generation engine wrapped in a body built in Turin. Nearly 20 years had gone into demonstrating this technology to the public from behind a rope line. This time, the company was going to hand over the keys. Before the rest of this makes sense, the mechanism itself needs explaining. In the engine you learned to drive behind, fuel and air get pulled into a cylinder, squeezed by a piston, and set off by a spark plug at a precisely chosen moment. And that timing governs everything. Get it wrong, and the engine knocks or refuses to run at all. Octane rating exists because of that timing, since it measures how well a fuel resists lighting before you want it to. A diesel solves the same problem from the other direction, with no spark plug at all, ignition by compression alone, and a cetane number describing how readily the fuel catches. A gas turbine escapes that problem entirely because it never stops burning. Air enters the front and gets squeezed by a compressor to roughly 4 times atmospheric pressure. Fuel sprays into a chamber called the combustor, where a single spark plug lights it once at startup, and after that, the flame never goes out. Combustion runs continuously the whole time the engine is alive, and the gas rushing out of that chamber spins a turbine wheel that drives the compressor. Engineers call that first wheel the gasifier turbine, and its only job is keeping the engine fed. Behind it sits a second wheel with no mechanical connection to the first at all. That one is the free power turbine, and that one drives the car. The separation between those two wheels explains why a turbine feels the way it does. Since nothing but moving gas spins the output wheel, you can hold it completely still while the engine roars along at full speed behind it, which means maximum torque arrives at 0 road speed. Chrysler's engine, designated the A831, produced 425 pound-feet at stall, meaning with the output shaft not turning whatsoever. It fed a modified TorqueFlite 3-speed automatic carrying no fluid torque converter inside it, because the free power turbine already served as one. The numbers surrounding it are the part everybody remembers. 130 horsepower, arriving at 36,000 revolutions per minute. Idle sat between 18 and 22,000. Chrysler's driver's guide listed 44,500 as the maximum safe speed. And at 120 miles an hour, the gasifier side was turning 60,000. A pyrometer sat on the dash reading up to 1,700 degrees, because 1,700 degrees is what the gas hit at the turbine inlet, and the driver was expected to watch it. Then there is everything this car did not have. No radiator, no antifreeze, no cooling system in any sense you would recognize, no connecting rods, and no crankshaft. Roughly 1/5 the moving parts of a piston engine, all of it inside a package weighing about 410 pounds. It started reliably at 20 below zero, and despite those 1,700 degrees at the inlet, exhaust at idle never climbed past 180. None of that last part was luck. Chrysler's real contribution to the art sat inside the engine as twin regenerators, a pair of rotating honeycomb discs parked in the exhaust stream that soaked up heat which would otherwise have escaped out the tailpipe and turned it back around into the incoming air. Free heat, recycled, and the idea traced all the way back to Chrysler's 1954 work. That is why the tailpipes on this car could be built from thin, riveted aluminum sheet. Strip it down and you get no timing, no octane, no cetane, and no spark after the first second. A piston engine burns fuel in a controlled series of explosions and cares enormously about what you feed it, while a turbine simply burns it. That difference is the entire reason a family coupe could drink tequila. What Chrysler did next unfolded across 4 stages, and each one looks stranger than the one before it. Stage 1. They gave the cars away. 55 were built between October of 1963 and October of 1964, 5 prototypes, and 50 identical program cars. Carrozzeria Ghia hand-built the bodies in Turin, painting, trimming, and upholstering each one there before shipping them to Detroit, where Chrysler dropped in the turbine, the transmission, the wiring, the radio, and the heater at its Greenfield Road facility. Every last one of them wore the same paint, a metallic shade called turbine bronze that landed roughly at the color of root beer. Styling came out of Chrysler's design department under Elwood Engel, who had shaped the Ford Thunderbird before he arrived, and people who saw the finished car took one look and started calling it the Engelbird. Somebody inside the company had floated the name Typhoon early on, but in the end, it was never given a name at all. The object worth holding in your mind for this stage is not the car itself. It is the driver's guide that came with it, a booklet handed to civilians listing which fuels they were permitted to pour into a jet engine. Because Chrysler then handed these cars to the public, 203 drivers took part, spread across 133 cities in the 48 contiguous states and the District of Columbia, 3 months apiece. The user paid for fuel and nothing else, while Chrysler covered maintenance and insurance. The very first car went to a man named Richard Vlaha of Broadview, Illinois, just outside Chicago, in October of 1963. And every family sat for an in-depth interview within 2 weeks of handing their car back. Turning unsupported, hand-built prototypes over to strangers sounds like an unforced error, and it was nothing of the kind. No other route to the data existed. A proving ground tells you what an engine does when engineers drive it, and what Chrysler needed to learn was what it did when a 70-year-old in Nebraska drove it in January. More than 30,000 people wrote in asking to be one of those drivers. The 203 selected formed a genuine cross-section, 180 men and 23 women, ages 21 to 70, with about 60% of them already driving Chryslers. And the thing worked. Across the life of the program, from October of '63 through January of '66, that fleet covered more than 1 million miles, while downtime dropped from 4% at the start to 1% by the end. Here is the deflating part. Period reports put fuel economy for these cars somewhere between 11.5 and 19 miles per gallon, depending on how they were driven, which left a jet-powered coupe sitting exactly level with a small block V8 in a mid-sized two-door of the same year. 0 to 60 took about 12 seconds. Starting one ran to 8 separate steps, and enough owners fumbled it and damaged engines that Chrysler added a transmission lockout partway through the program to stop people selecting a gear too early. Whenever something broke, the company dispatched a factory engineer to the owner. That arrangement matters later, and not for the reason it looks like. Stage 2, the fuel list. The object for this stage is that glass perfume bottle from the opening, and we are going to have to handle it carefully. The driver's guide recommended kerosene and diesel first, followed by unleaded gasoline mixed with diesel. Past that, Chrysler and the owner's manual listed vegetable oil, peanut oil, soybean oil, furnace oil, and JP4 jet fuel, all of which is documented. There is a second, well-attested story of a Chrysler engineer running one of these cars on peanut oil at a peanut festival, where witnesses reported that the exhaust smelled like a restaurant kitchen. The Tequila holds up too. When the car reached Mexico City in January of 1964, President Adolfo López Mateos asked the question and offered to provide the bottles, and Huebner's team in Detroit tested it before anyone agreed to anything. The Associated Press moved the story on the wire on the 13th of January, 1964, reporting in plain language that tests conducted there had established the turbine car would run on 80-proof tequila. Which brings us back to the perfume, and to where that line actually came from. It belongs to Chrysler's own promotional copy, written as an advertising boast about multi-fuel capability, and read the careful sources, and you will notice they always word it as something Chrysler claimed, rather than something Chrysler did. Steve Leno, who wrote the definitive history of these cars out of interviews with the men who built them, files the perfume story as rumor, and raises the obvious practical objection that Chanel No. 5 would be an absurd thing to buy by the gallon. The version where Chrysler supposedly filled a tank in Paris traces back only to blogs, citing no source at all. The car could almost certainly have run on perfume, since perfume is alcohol-based and it burns. Nothing suggests anyone ever tried. And exactly one fuel sat on the forbidden list, which almost nobody mentions. Leaded gasoline burned perfectly well, but the lead deposits wrecked the engine's internals, so users were warned off it specifically. Consider what that meant in 1963. Chrysler had built a car that would happily run on cooking oil and could not tolerate the fuel sold at nearly every filling station in the country. Stage 3. The Crusher. The program closed in January of 1966. That April, a Chrysler vice president announced the cars would be withdrawn regardless of what happened next. And in 1967, 46 of the 55 were destroyed, with reportedly 45 crushed at a scrapyard south of Detroit and one demolished at the Chelsea Proving Grounds. Film exists of a car being skewered by a forklift, drained, crushed, and burned. And that forklift is the object to hold on to here. The explanation you will hear everywhere involves import duty. The argument being that the Ghia bodies came in from Italy under a temporary arrangement tied to the evaluation program, so keeping them would have triggered customs charges. That story is disputed, and the arithmetic is why. American auto import tariffs in the 1960s ran around 2.5%, working out to roughly $500 a car and about $23,000 for the entire fleet, set against millions already spent. Bill Carey, who ran the service program for these cars nationwide, put it to Leno directly, saying the duties would have been peanuts. A Chrysler executive told Look magazine at the time that the objective was research, and the company did not want turbines turning up on used car lots. Here is where the arrangement from Stage 1 pays off. These cars existed only because Chrysler sent its own engineers out to keep them running. No dealer could service one, no parts supply existed, and no trained mechanic worked on them outside a small team. A company still hoping to sell a turbine someday had every reason to keep 50 rough-running prototypes out of the used market with its badge on the trunk. Nobody killed those cars to dodge a $500 bill. They died because they could not survive outside the company that built them. 9 escaped, and one of those, reportedly, because Bill Harrah paid the equivalent of the duty owed. Stage 4. The long afterlife. Nothing stopped in '66. The work ran 15 more years, and this is the stretch almost nobody covers. A Department of Commerce report in October of 1967 called the turbine unsuited to automobiles, and Chrysler kept going anyway. In 1972, the Environmental Protection Agency granted the company about $6.4 million to continue development, aimed at emissions, mileage, and manufacturing cost, and a federal contract for an upgraded engine started that November, administered, of all places, through NASA's Lewis Research Center. The oil crisis landed the following year and swung every American manufacturer's attention toward fuel economy, which should have been the turbine's moment, and turned out to be the diesels instead. The object for this stage is a 1976 Dodge Aspen. 2 of them were built carrying 7th-generation turbine engines, and 1977 brought a one-off turbine LeBaron put together as a production preview. Then June of 1979 delivered the final report on that federal contract, and the numbers inside it tell the whole story. 15 miles per gallon combined is what the upgraded engine achieved, measured against a goal of 18.3. That represented a 46% improvement over where they had started, and it still fell short. Oxides of nitrogen, the one emission a continuously burning engine is naturally bad at, remained unsolved. 24 years of work, 7 generations of engine, still 18% short of its own mileage target. June 1979. Chrysler's federal turbine contract reaches its end date, and nobody renews it, because the goals written into it were not met. October 1979. The Department of Energy opens a new and larger automotive gas turbine program and announces the awards, with General Motors taking one and Garrett and Ford taking the other. Chrysler's name does not appear. The company that put a turbine in front of 500 reporters in 1954, drove one across the country in 56, and handed 50 of them to the American public in 63, now watches the federal turbine program continue without it. Meanwhile, the company itself is dying. Chrysler's loss for 1979 comes to $1.126 billion. At that moment, the largest annual loss in the history of American business. And the following year, it will lose $1.71 billion and break its own record. December 13, 1979. The House passes House Resolution 5860 by 271 to 136. December 21st, the Senate follows, 53 to 44.
On January 7, 1980, President Carter signs it into law as Public Law 96-185, the Chrysler Corporation Loan Guarantee Act of 1979, authorizing $1.5 billion in guarantees, of which Chrysler will draw $1.2 billion. The act installs a board to supervise the company, chaired by Treasury Secretary G. William Miller, and seating Federal Reserve Chairman Paul Volcker alongside Comptroller General Elmer Statz. That board demands roughly $2 billion in savings and concessions from everyone holding a stake in Chrysler, meaning the unions, the suppliers, the lenders, the dealers, and the states. And here is the part that gets repeated wrong. Read the act. It requires Chrysler to submit an operating plan, a financing plan, and an energy-saving plan, each one satisfactory to the board. The Congressional Research Service published a provision-by-provision summary listing every major condition in the law.
Neither the statute nor the summary mentions the gas turbine, not once. No clause orders the program closed, no line item exists, and the government never told Chrysler to kill the turbine. What the government did was stop paying for it in June, hand the work to somebody else in October, and then install a board in January with authority over every dollar the company spent while requiring $2 billion in cuts. Nobody had to write the order. The last turbine vehicle Chrysler built was a Dodge Mirada in 1980. An 8th-generation engine, a single-shaft design intended for the front-wheel drive K-car platform, got drawn up and never built. The program ended in 1981. The common explanation is that the bailout killed the turbine. The documents show something different. The statute stays silent on it. The federal funding had already gone elsewhere 4 months earlier, and the decision to stop came from inside Chrysler, written into a corporate operating plan by executives choosing where to spend money they had borrowed against a federal guarantee. That said, the popular version is not empty, and it deserves a fair hearing. The board genuinely demanded roughly $2 billion in concessions, and it genuinely held approval authority over Chrysler's operating plan. A research program with no product in its 24th year at a company that had just posted the largest corporate loss in American history was never going to survive that arrangement. The popular story gets the effect right and only gets the mechanism wrong. One thing I cannot settle for you is the paperwork itself, because Chrysler's board-approved operating plan is a corporate document, and if a specific line canceling the turbine exists anywhere, that is where it would sit. It has never been made public. So rank the causes honestly, because the bailout does not come first on the list. Cost comes first. Stellantis' own historian has put it plainly that a mid-range car in the 1960s sold for around $3,000, while the turbine engine alone cost $10,000 or more to manufacture. The engine ran hot enough to demand exotic high-temperature alloys, and no volume production accounting ever made those numbers work. Second come oxides of nitrogen, which a continuously burning engine produces in quantity, and which Chrysler never defeated across 7 generations. Third is fuel economy. 15 miles per gallon against a goal of 18.3 in the last report ever written on the subject. Fourth, and smallest, is throttle lag, which the engineers had cut dramatically by the 60s, and which customers still noticed anyway. You will read that the turbine stood production-ready by the mid-70s. Chrysler's engineers believed exactly that, and a technical paper says so. The federal test reports from those same years record an engine missing its emissions and mileage targets. Both claims live in the record, and the test data is the primary source. What replaced it was the K car, and the 2.2-liter four-cylinder, front-wheel drive, cheap to build and into dealerships fast, which is precisely the product a company under that board had to make. What went away with the turbine was the fuel flexibility, the 1/5 parts count, and that vibration-free running the owners in the user program praised above everything else. The technology did not vanish from American roads so much as change vehicles. Chrysler Defense designed the M1 Abrams tank and specified a Lycoming turbine for it, with the first production tanks delivered in 1980, and in February of 1982, still repairing its balance sheet, Chrysler sold Chrysler Defense to General Dynamics, and the tank went with it. The engine inside that tank is a Lycoming design rather than Chrysler's automotive turbine, but the heat exchanger buried in it works on the same principle as the regenerators that kept the tailpipes cool on a bronze coupe in 1964. 9 cars survive today, held by the Smithsonian, the Henry Ford in Dearborn, the Peterson in Los Angeles, the Detroit Historical Museum, the National Museum of Transportation in St. Louis, and the Stahls Collection in Michigan, with Stellantis keeping 2. Most of the museum cars had their fan assemblies pulled to guarantee they would never run again. One belongs to Jay Leno, who bought it after the Walter P. Chrysler Museum closed to the public at the end of 2012. Around 2014, he was driving it when the engine, in his words, just melted down. Williams International rebuilt it, a company founded by Sam Williams, who had been one of Chrysler's original turbine engineers. His son Greg led the restoration, brought back around 60 of the original team members, worked from surviving blueprints, and used metal 3D printing to recreate parts that no longer exist anywhere on Earth. Leno drove the revived car in public at the Woodward Dream Cruise in 2024, and he has called it a lost technology, like steam. There is something worth sitting with in how this ended. No better engine ever beat the turbine. What beat it was an accountant's column, a pollutant it could not stop producing, and a moment in 1979 when the money moved quietly to somebody else's laboratory, and nobody thought to record it as a decision. The most durable thing Chrysler ever produced in this program was not the turbine at all. It was a sentence in an advertisement. Peanut oil to Chanel No. 5, which has now outlived the engine, the program, the man who ran it, and 46 of the 55 cars. The car could burn nearly anything. The line about the perfume burned longest.